Bibliophiles of the internet, today I thought I would share some upcoming releases that I've saved, bookmarked, or otherwise come across on social media. Now, social media is both a powerful and dangerous tool, but regardless, it's where I get a ton of quality recommendations, not only from other creators who I know and respect, but also from following authors and publishing imprints. There is literally so much happening all of the time with book promotion and publicity online. You have your standard book deal announcements, cover reveals, general promotional posts in the run-up to a book's release, book tours, ad space, so on and so forth. So I thought I would dive into the depths of my upcoming releases folder on Instagram and see what there is to look forward to in the coming months. To be clear, this is not in chronological order of release, but rather chronological order of when I save them on my phone. If I'm feeling especially magnanimous, I might put them in an ordered list down below in the description, but let's just get into it. First we have If I Loved You Less by Amna Qureshi, which I believe is coming out on July 18th from Harper UK. This is a modern-day rom-com retelling of Emma, but with Muslim characters, which just sounds delightful. It's about a Muslim woman named Humaira who successfully found the one for both her aunt and her sister, and she's ready to welcome her one true love into her own life. When she tries to match herself with Rizwan Ali, she's forced to endure the disapproval of Fawad, a longtime family friend. They trade barbs, they get into unintentional misadventures, and then Humaira realizes something truly shocking. She might actually care what Fawad thinks. I love an Austen retelling. I love classic stories reimagined in a new cultural context and for a modern audience. I love rom-coms. The iconic title obviously caught my attention right away, so I will definitely be checking this one out at some point. Then I have In the Shadow of the Fall by Toby Ogundiran, which comes out on July 23rd from Tor.com. This is a fantasy novella and the first installment in a new duology about a reignited cosmic war that causes the fate of the Orisha to lie in the hands of an untried acolyte. It follows Ashike, who's an acolyte in the temple of Ifa, and she's been trying to become a priest for many years. But for some reason, the Orisha will not acknowledge her, and so she's essentially stuck. She decides that she's going to trap an Orisha and basically force the interaction, but instead she ends up having a terrible, powerful vision that draws the attention of an enemy sect and thrusts her into the center of a centuries-old conflict. I honestly don't even feel like I need to explain myself on this one. Cosmic war, spiteful gods, untried acolyte with the future of the world in their hands. It just sounds badass. While we're talking about Tor and fantasy, I also want to bring up Asunder by Kirsten Hall, which comes out again from Tor.com on August 20th. This is a standalone dark fantasy novel about Karis, who is a death speaker locked into an unbreakable compact with a three-faced, hundred-winged eldritch creature, and through this pact she's been granted the ability to communicate with the newly dead. She pays her due by using these abilities to investigate suspicious deaths around the city, but her world is upended when a job goes sideways and connects her to a dying stranger with some very dangerous secrets. One of my favorite authors, Isabel Cañas, recently wrote about this book in her newsletter about how she wasn't even approached to blurb it. She requested a copy herself on NetGalley, not as an author, but as a reader, and once she read it, she basically begged the publisher to let her write something about the book. And that testimony alone just makes me want to completely upend my TBR because I do have a galley of this. Listen, I hear a story has necromantic magic and corporeal bonds with eldritch monsters, and I come running. It's really just that simple. Switching gears a bit, we have There is a Rio Grande in Heaven by Ruben Reyes Jr., which comes out on August 6th from Mariner Books. This is a debut short story collection focused on Central American identity that spans past, present, and future worlds. I'm just going to repeat part of the official synopsis because it says it far better than I ever could. It says, There is a Rio Grande in Heaven subverts everything we think we know about migration and its consequences, capturing what it means to take up a new life, whether willfully or forced, with piercing and brilliant clarity. Everything about this, from the synopsis to the format to the incredible cover design to the title itself, makes me so excited to read this. And again, while we're talking about Latina releases, I do have to be a little bit self-indulgent and talk about Isabel and the Rogue by Liana de la Rosa, which comes out on June 4th from Berkeley Romance. This is a Latina historical romance. It is the sequel/companion to Ana Maria and the Fox, but I believe they can both be read as standalone romances. I would personally read them in order because they're just that good, but that's just my opinion. In this story, we're following the middle sister, Isabel, who's used to being the forgotten sister, but she decides to use that invisibility to her advantage by leveraging the familial connection she has to the Mexican ambassador in London to unearth any British intelligence that might aid Mexico in their revolution against the French. Enter Captain Sirius Dawson, who is a covert agent for the British Home Office who spends his days befriending people and hoping to learn their secrets. And when he spies a certain Luna sister lurking where a proper debutante ought not to be, he knows he is outmatched, outwitted, and soon to be outmaneuvered by a woman he just cannot resist. I loved Ana Maria and the Fox so much. It's a book I think back to with incredible fondness when I think about the books I read in 2023. It was such a delight, such a refreshing entry into the historical romance space, and I cannot tell you how psyched I am to get to this second book. I'm also incredibly excited for Don't Be a Drag by Skye Quinlan, which comes out fairly soon actually from Page Street on May 28th. This is about two rival drag kings competing for a crown who might just win each other's hearts instead, which sounds fantastic. We're following Briar, whose mental health has taken a dive and her parents sent her to spend the summer with her older brother, who happens to moonlight as a drag queen. When backstage at one of his shows, Briar sees a drag king being super conceited and stuck up, so on a whim she decides to sign up for the annual drag king competition to put him in his place, even though she's never done drag before, even once. We as a community owe so much to our history that is rooted in drag and in ballroom culture as a whole, so I'm really glad that drag, especially a story about drag kings who are lesser discussed, is actually taking center stage in what sounds like a really thoughtful and fun romance. Keeping up with my chaotic segues, speaking of Peachtree, I'm also of course anticipating Compound Fracture by Andrew Joseph White, which is coming out on September 3rd. This is Andrew Joseph White's latest queer YA horror book. It's about a trans and autistic teenager, Miles, who comes out to his parents and promptly sneaks off to a party carrying evidence that might just turn the tide in a century-old blood feud plaguing his small Appalachian town of Twist Creek. You know, as one does. It's a 100-year-old feud that began when Miles's great-great-grandfather incited a miners' rebellion that ended in a public execution at the hands of local law enforcement. And the truth about that rebellion is something that a lot of people don't want to see come to light. As usual, this is described as being a visceral, violent, disgusting, disturbing horror thriller that is absolutely not for the faint of heart. I am so excited. I am fully ready to be disgusted, horrified, and baptized in the fire of the written word in a way that only Andrew Joseph White can pull off. Switching gears again, I was also very intrigued with The Coin by Yasmin Zaher, which comes out on July 9th from Catapult. This is adult fiction. It's about a young Palestinian woman living and teaching in New York who gets caught up in a scheme reselling Birkin bags. It's described as a gradual unraveling as the main character struggles to access things like her inheritance, her homeland, and the American dream itself. And she also eventually pulls her middle schoolers into her spiraling obsessions with her until her distant memories converge with her current existential crisis at an unprecedented tipping point. You know me, I love weird shit, and this just sounds bizarre. From the main character's unruly discontent to the Birkin bag pyramid scheme, all of it just sounds wild and like it's leading up to some kind of unpredictable boiling point, and I can't wait to figure out what that is. I want to talk about some middle grade too, starting with Sabrina Swept Away by Karuna Riazi, which is coming out on June 18th from Green Willow Books. This is a middle grade portal fantasy inspired by 1001 Nights, and which the author describes as having Spirited Away vibes as well. It's about Sabrina, whose father has always said that their family is descended from the legendary sailor Sinbad, and the sea has always seemed to call to Sabrina as well, so it definitely seems to be fate. Though she wants to be the dutiful and exemplary daughter, one day she can no longer deny the call of the sea, and it sweeps her away only for her to be fished out of an entirely different ocean that's oddly familiar but still entirely strange. She immediately recognizes it as the world of her favorite storybook, 1001 Nights, except no one here has heard of Sinbad, a frightening djinn is terrorizing the kingdoms, and nothing seems to be going quite the same way as it does in the stories. This sounds so fun and so whimsical. I love stories about characters falling into storybooks or familiar stories and becoming the heroes themselves. This seems like it's going to be both magical and also thoughtful in the way it explores being torn between fate and choice. Then, of course, while we're talking about middle grade, I have to talk about one of my most anticipated middle grade releases, The Beautiful Game by Shamila Sayed Mendez, which comes out from Algonquin Young Readers on September 17th. It's about 13-year-old Valeria, who is an extremely talented soccer player, and thanks to her abuelo's tough love coaching and soccer lessons, she's actually risen to become the star of the top boys team in the state. But everything changes when she gets her first period during a match, I think, and then her team also gets eliminated, and everyone blames her for that loss. But with the help of her grandmother and support of her friends, she decides to join the first girls' team she's ever played for. But of course, after years of ignoring the other girl soccer players, she'll have to figure out where she fits in on the team and just how to play like a girl. If you remember, Jamila's first book, her YA debut, was Furia, which was also a contemporary soccer story, and I loved it so much. I am so excited that she's finally written another soccer book, but this time for a middle grade audience, and it seems to be tackling issues like sexism in sports, disparities between teams when it comes to gendered sports, puberty, change, second chances, female empowerment. I think it's going to be great. Then coming out on August 6th, we have The Truth According to Ember by Danica Nava from Berkeley Romance. I believe this is set to be the first ever traditionally published Indigenous romance written by an Indigenous author from a Big Five publisher, which is a lot of words, but also a very big deal. It's a rom-com about a Chickasaw woman named Ember who's coming up empty on the job search. Apparently, she's received 37 rejections. So as an experiment, she stops checking off Native American in the ethnicity portion of her job applications and answers white instead, and she immediately sees results. She accepts this swanky corporate job, and on the very first day, she runs into Denawoa, the IT guy and fellow native, and instantly feels a spark with him. But of course, there's a no dating policy at work, and he also doesn't know that she's native herself. I recently heard the author talk about this book at an event, especially about how the job search portion was inspired by her own experiences. She also talked about how she loves to incorporate physical humor and comedic tropes alongside the romance, so I think this is going to be both a strong social commentary and hopefully a heartwarming romance. Keeping on the romance track, I wanted to talk about an indie queer romance called Cubs and Campfires by Dylan Drakes. According to the author, this is a spicy summer romance about chunky men, campfires, and cuddles under the starlight. It's about a struggling journalism graduate named Luca who kind of ran his mouth during a job interview and somehow accidentally committed himself to a vow of celibacy for the summer. I think it might be for like an article he's pitching, and if he can actually see it through and write about it, he'll get the job. So he decides to find the most isolated job he can get as a fire lookout deep in the mountains, but his plans are promptly ruined when Arter, a flirtatious musician and wilderness enthusiast, begins camping nearby. I love this cover. I love that the story is very unapologetically centering two characters who are bears, which is to say, fat gay men. I love that body positivity is a piece of the story, and it also just seems like a fun summer romance. And while I absolutely don't think it's productive to police who writes queer fiction and why, or to demand that authors show their quote-unquote credentials for writing certain kinds of queer fiction, I think on the same token it's also really exciting to see gay fiction written by gay men. That's great. Speaking of queer stuff, let's talk about Till the Last Beat of My Heart by Luangi Bull Montez, coming out from Harper Teen on September 9th. This is a queer YA contemporary fantasy story about Jackson, the son of a local mortician whose world is turned upside down when his mom receives the body of Christian Reyes, his once best friend and first crush. Jackson accidentally resurrects Christian somehow, but as he learns more about his newfound necromantic abilities, he's realizing that Christian is living on borrowed time that is quickly going to run out. I feel like I don't even have to say this, but this has big Cemetery Boys energy, but with Black and Afro-Latina characters and necromancy, and I am here for that any day of the week. And again, speaking of queer, obviously I lost my mind over the cover of Sword Crossed by Freya Marsky, which comes out from Bramble Romance on October 8th. The tagline is high heat, low stakes, sharp steel, which I love so much. It's about Matt Nesh, who's struggling to maintain his family's business, and to that end he also needs to hire an experienced swordsman to serve as his best man in his arranged marriage in order to avoid a mid-ceremony sword challenge. Enter Luca, a part-time con artist who's trying to reinvent himself in a new city, and who also somehow ends up being blackmailed into giving Maddie sword lessons. As the wedding draws closer, they realize there is indeed a spark between them, and they're also becoming more and more entangled in the secrets threatening to bring down Maddie's house in the first place. I quite enjoyed Freya Marski's debut trilogy, especially the last book, A Power Unbound, so I'm very excited to see her continue in that vein and share what sounds like a new, delightful, standalone queer fantasy romance. As we wind down here, I have a little bit of a wild card that randomly came across my feed, that is The Favorites by Lane Fargo, which comes out on July 16th, yes, that is 2025, from Random House. This seems like a mixture of romance and literary fiction. It's about Katarina Shaw, who's always felt that she was destined to become an Olympic skater, and then she meets another lonely kid stuck in the foster care system named Heath, and they start skating together until they eventually become champion ice dancers. They have this rebellious, tantalizing skating style, not to mention out-of-this-world chemistry, and a roller coaster relationship on and off the ice. But an incredibly shocking incident at the Olympic Games brings their partnership to a sudden end, and 10 years later there are whispers about a tell-all documentary coming to light. And so Kat decides to take part in that documentary to dispel the rumors that have been haunting her ever since, and to prove that the truth is actually even more shocking than what was in the headlines. I am so excited about this, you have no idea. Ice skating is one of my favorite sports, if not my favorite sport, and this sounds like all the juiciest parts of it just rolled into one. It sounds messy, enticing, thrilling, dramatic, over the top, and I cannot wait. I'm gonna end with two more recent announcements. They're so new that we don't have covers, we don't have a ton of information, but I'm super excited nonetheless. First is Hollow is the Heart by H.E. Edgman. It's coming out from Tor Nightfire, but I don't think we have a date yet. I presume 2025 at soonest. Again, this is so new that there's no listing anywhere. It's not on Goodreads, Storygraph, it's not on the publisher's website, so everything we know is directly from this post. Quoting it directly, Hollow is the Heart is an adult, queer, dark academia story. It's about the characters Ick, who is a trans single dad and high school dropout, Laramie, who's a wide-eyed university student and obsessed with esoteric history, and Red, their god or monster, depending on who you ask. H.E. describes it as monster fuckery and also says that it explores academia as a weapon of colonization, highlighting the danger of trespassing in places that don't belong to us. And he also says it's horny as fuck. So there's that. H.E. Edgman has absolutely pushed the boundaries of young adult fiction, which is everything they've written so far, giving us these messy, horrifying, disturbing, furious characters, so I cannot wait to see what they do in the adult space. Lastly, I want to highlight a book deal that, again, has very little information besides the actual post itself. That is for Hamanjang Luck by Makana Yamamoto, which was originally slated for 2025, but now may be coming out in December 2024, at least in the UK. It's an adult sci-fi enemies to lovers lesbian space heist pitched as Ocean's 8 meets Gideon the Ninth. And I almost feel like I don't need to say anything else, but it's about an ex-con named Edie who spent 8 years in prison after being sold out by someone very close to them, and when they get out early, that former associate, Angel, offers them one last job for a huge score and the chance to take down the man who actually put them away in the first place. At first, Edie is determined to walk away from that life entirely, not only because they've already missed out on so much, but because working with Angel is just too complicated and confusing. But if they do pull it off and get that 1.25 billion payout, that might just heal some of those wounds. This just sounds fantastic. I love a good space heist. I love a story about non-binary lesbians. I love a Gideon the Ninth comp. I love that we're getting more queer genre fiction from a mixed-race Native Hawaiian author as well. Trust me when I say I am keeping my eyes peeled for any and all news about this release. So those are all the upcoming titles I wanted to chat about today. Thank you for indulging me. This definitely could have been a much shorter video, but at the same time, this was absolutely me holding myself back. Let me know if you plan on reading any of these, or feel free to drop your own anticipated releases down below in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, educate yourself, be kind to yourself, take care of yourself and others, and I will catch you on the flip side of the page.